Okay, so let's jump into our matchups, Bryan. Matchups to watch on offense and defense. You want to go O or D first?
Let's start with the Notre Dame defense because ultimately that's the matchup that matters.
Oh,
I mean,
you're not kidding.
That's the matchup. I mean, because the
Yeah.
matchup advantages that Notre Dame has against the Virginia defense is like, okay, picking a spot.
I know it was kind
10
of
out
a
of the
blind.
11 spots. You know
It's
what I mean? Like,
this
there's
one.
really only one matchup that has me concerned, and we'll get into
Right.
that. So let's focus on the defensive one first.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll lead off. My first defensive matchup, it's Brennan Armstrong versus the front for Notre Dame, and here's why specifically. We talked yesterday with Sean Davis, and he's like the NASCAR front. I want to see the NASCAR front, from Notre Dame. Speaking about the defensive line, pin your ears back, go get them, kind of thing. And I tend to agree with him. I like that thought process, and moreover, I want them to hit him. I want him to make him uncomfortable. Okay, I am not advocating that they hurt him or anything along those lines. Okay, but he's not going to be 100% if he plays. Okay, it's a rib injury. Those hurt. Okay, they hurt when you breathe at times, right? So make him uncomfortable. If he's going to scramble a little bit, if he gets that first down, a little extra, not extra, but like make sure he feels that he got out of the pocket.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I want to see the front make Brennan Armstrong uncomfortable because I think that could go a long way to Notre Dame doing what they want to do defensively against Virginia, because if they knock them out, obviously that is an even bigger deal if they have to put in their backup because there's a big drop off at that point. But if they can just make him not as effective as he normally is, I mean, he accounts for 420 yards a game by himself. So if you can just make him less effective, you've done your job, in my opinion. So if the front can be effective against Brennan Armstrong, I think they have a very good day.
I think they need to just play the front four they've been playing and just turn them loose. I think when they've turned their I don't think they need to go to a smaller, faster D line. They need to put Jordan Patelho on the opposite side. I always like that as a change up.
It's a mix up, sure.
But when they turn the front four loose, the only time Notre Dame struggled to get pass rush this year is when they go with a 3-man front. That's it, and
right.
As long as you go to 4-man front and turn Isaiah Foskey loose, look, I'm sorry. I love Coach Freeman, but if this is a game where he's got Isaiah Foskey dropping into coverage a bunch, that's a mistake. I believe it is. You've got to turn him loose and let him go. And, that's kind of one of my matchups that I have is not the quarterback versus the front. It's the two tackles against the front because they're not good. I mean, they're not real athletic. The one kid's like 6'10". He struggles to play with the kind of pad level and leverage that you need to play with because he's 6'10". They abused him in 2019. He's been susceptible to giving up hits and sacks this year. They've got to control that matchup. And they've used two different right tackles this year, and they've got to dominate that matchup as well. Both of those guys have struggled this year. I'm sorry, they've used two different left tackles. Swoboda is the right tackle like he was 2 years ago. But they've used two different left tackles this year, and neither of them have played well. They've got to put pressure on the quarterback. The one thing, and it's not so much about hitting Brennan Armstrong, although let me tell you, I was a quarterback that did not like wearing rib pads. I didn't like how they felt. I felt they slowed me down. I felt weird throwing. So I was one of those idiots that didn't wear them. And so I've had my fair share of rib injuries. Yeah, I mean, it's just every time you inhale, it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh, I mean, you can't – trust me, you get out in the game trying to play and your adrenaline is only going to go so far. That's one of those injuries that your adrenaline doesn't do a whole lot for because you can't breathe. So I think the matchup for the defensive line is also going to be important from the standpoint of they've got to shut down the run. It's not just about the quarterback. They've got to shut down the run because if you're Virginia and you're smart and you want to protect your quarterback, the first thing that you're going to try to do come out in the game is throw Notre Dame off. Because Notre Dame's going to be pinning the ears back thinking stop the pass, stop the pass, stop the pass, right? So what you want to try to do is say, hey, you can't just pin your ears back and come after our quarterback, okay? I think they're going to come out and try to run the ball. Notre Dame's got to say right away, nope, not happening. Right. Sorry, fellas, you're not going to be able to do that. And so to me, that's why that front four matchup is important. My first matchup, Vince, was Marcus Freeman against Robert Anae. And that's the big thing for me. Look, this Virginia team is so incredibly well schemed on offense. I love what they do because they're not a super talented team. They're incredibly well schemed. I mean, just you never know where certain guys are going to line up. They're going to move guys around. They're great at getting isolations. They do. As I broke down their film, I was like, good God, if Notre Dame ran this offense, to be scoring 50 points a game, because they do so many, like they'll stack, they'll do post-snap switches, they get guys in crosses. They're great about using Kaitlyn Thompson, which is my number 2 matchups. I'm going to put these together against the linebackers and safeties. They're great about getting him lined up and finding out how can we use formations and motions and shifts to make sure that he's lined up on a safety or a linebacker, and then we're going to make that guy chase him. I mean, they're so good at that. And so, I mean, that's what an offensive coordinator is supposed to be about. It's like, take your best players, develop, find ways to get them in matchups that work for you, make this defense chase and run and have to guess, okay, hey, this guy went here, that guy went there. We're doing high lows, we're doing crosses, we're doing meshes, we're doing all these kind of things. Make them have to communicate. The more they communicate and the more that they have to talk and switch and do all that stuff, the more prone they are to make a mistake. And that's the things that you got to do. And I love that. Whereas Notre Dame just kind of lines up in their sets and just run their routes. These guys make you think, make you communicate, make you talk. Notre Dame's probably not going to have Kyle Hamilton on Saturday, based on what Brian Kelly said today. He has not been medically cleared yet, which makes me think he hasn't practiced yet, which makes me think he's not going to play Saturday.
Right.
So they're going to have to be on top of their game. And so it's going to be up to Marcus Freeman to make sure his game plan is aggressive, but also one that protects his vulnerable areas, because Robert Anae is going to try to expose them. And that's going to be a big key to this game.
You're absolutely right. And it's funny because you look at the guys that, on the stat sheet, right, for Virginia, and, you look at some of these names and you're seeing a ton of catches for a lot of these guys. They spread the ball around very, very effectively. And it's guys that you've never heard of, because they're, like, to your point, Notre Dame's going to they've got better players. Notre Dame has better players, but Virginia, the scheme gets guys open, and then those guys do what they need to do. It's not a one trick pony as far as who is the main receiver and all that. They spread it around, and if you're going to take away one area, they're going to abuse you in another area. So it's not just a Cam Hart that needs to be on his, P's and Q's. It's not just one guy that they have to identify every time out of the huddle. All of those guys, and Ramon Henderson most likely included, they've got to have a good game on Saturday. They have to. Clarence Lewis, Tariq Bracy, Ramon Henderson, Cam Hart, both safeties, they have to play well, because they're gonna scheme their way away from Notre Dame's strength. And they're gonna pick on guys. They're gonna pick on the perceived weaknesses. So Notre Dame needs to come to play. I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is gonna be big time on Marcus Freeman to make sure that he's not exposing his perceived weaknesses on defense to Virginia.
Yeah, I'm going to push back on one thing you said, Vince, about their talent. I don't think Notre Dame necessarily has better players at every spot when it comes to the defense against. I think this is a Virginia team that is not like super talented. Like, none of their receivers are David Bell. None of their receivers are Drake London, but they're good. They're good. And the thing is, they have a lot of good players. There's no great players. Like I look at Dontayvion Wicks, and I don't see a guy that's an NFL player, like first round pick, but I see a good football player that's put up really good numbers. I mean, he's had, I'm looking at his numbers, 5 100+ yard games this season and another with 94. Their tight end is a really good player, Jilani Woods. He's a big kid. He's 6'7". He's a good football player, right? That's a matchup problem. And that's a matchup problem, a 6'7" tight end against Notre Dame 6'1" linebackers. That's a matchup problem. I mean, so there are matchup problems that Virginia can give, which we haven't seen a lot. Because here's the difference between this group and some past groups. There's nobody at Virginia that I think is as individually good as Drake London, Josh Downs, or David Bell. But what I would say is their number 2, 3, and 4 are better than USC's 2, 3, and 4. Their 2, 3, and 4 are better than North Carolina's 2, 3, and 4.
Exactly.
Their 2, 3, and 4 are better than, Purdue had a similarly good deal with their tight end, and Notre Dame had a great game plan against them. But that Purdue offense isn't like the one that we've seen the last couple weeks from them. And so to me, that's a concern because, again, Notre Dame's not going to have probably Kyle Hamilton, and they can avoid Cam Hart, and they're going to pick on that. That was my other matchup. I mean, we're kind of getting all these matchups into one theme, really. It's a little different this week. But Clarence Lewis and Tariq Bracy against Dontavian Wicks. It's Houston Griffith against Billy Kemp and
Right.
Jilani Woods, and the Notre Dame linebackers against Billy Kemp and Jilani Woods. And there's some concerning matchups in this game, which makes it even more important that Marcus Freeman, number one, mix up his looks, but turn the pressure up. Because what you can't do, Vince, and you know this, you can't just line up and say we're gonna attack you from and be super aggressive and play cover one, because all the post snap switching and all the different things they do, they're gonna catch you. And when they catch you in one of those plays, it's gonna be a gone. That doesn't mean you can't do those things. It just means you can't only do those things.
Right. Absolutely.
You
We
have
talked
to
about
mix
that
up,
yesterday.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Notre Dame's defense is going to have to take some chances. I think they're going to have to take some chances. And that's where the defense has to count on the offense to pick them up in case some of those chances don't work.
Right. Which they won't. And that's
Right.
the truth. Look, Virginia's going to score. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
They're going to
exactly
score
right.
some. It's just about can you limit those times, and can you, like, to your point, can you take some chances?
Right.
When you look at the games where Virginia Tech has either lost or played competitively, Brennan Armstrong's turned the ball over in each one of those games.
Right.
He's
exactly.
thrown at least one interception in every one of their losses. He threw two against BYU. One of them was bad. I don't know if it was a pick six, but they ran it back a long way. I can't remember if he took it back to the house or not. He had a couple turnovers against Louisville. They only beat Louisville by one. Louisville's not very good. He will make mistakes, because if you can kind of come up and show a pressure and then smoke, right? So or play off, and then he's thinking he's going to throw a quick slant, and all of a sudden, right at snap, Cam Hart jumps the heck out of that route, something like that.
Right.
Things like that. You're going to do well. But the other thing too is you're in a bit of a predicament, because you're not going to want to leave Clarence Lewis on an island. So you're going to want to help him with your safety, but then that puts your linebackers and your rovers in matchups against Billy Kemp and the tight ends. And so they're just, without Kyle Hamilton, it just puts you in a really tough spot.
Agreed.
And that's what makes this a challenge. And so those are the, Kaitlyn Thompson against the linebackers and the safeties is a matchup that concerns me. Dontavian Wicks against Clarence Lewis and Tariq Bracy is a matchup that concerns me. That's why Marcus Freeman has to be on point, and that's why the defensive line has to be on point. And there's two players specifically that in this game have to bring it. This is a money game for Isaiah Foskey and Jason Adamiola. It is. This is a spotlight game. It's a big game. It's your team. It needs it. It's a good team. It's a great quarterback. It's an explosive offense. You've got to show, those two guys got to show that, hey, we can dominate a game. We can take a game over. We can neutralize what this team does because of how we play. We can neutralize the pass game because we dominated the point of attack. I don't care how good your quarterback is. If he's having to hit the top of his drop and move away from me, he's not going to be as effective. And so to me, that matchup, Notre Dame has an even bigger advantage there than what Virginia has on the perimeter, in my opinion. And so that they've got to win. That's how you win these games, right?
Yeah.
Is your matchup advantages play better than the areas where the other team has a matchup advantage.
Sure. I kind of gave away my next matchup as I was talking earlier, but I had Lewis and Bracy versus the depth of this wide receiving core, and I think it's going to be very, very important how they play in this game. Look, we've seen in the past that teams will pick on Clarence Lewis, right? They're going to pick on him again, right? And so he's going to have to step up. And I do think he has played better the last couple of games. But I also think that he's going to have an opportunity to prove some people wrong or prove them right in this game. I think he's going to get picked on. And so that's a matchup that I'm going to be paying really close attention to in this game. Absolutely.
Yeah, Dontavian Wicks and Rayshon Henry are going to be used to go after him.
Absolutely.
And Tariq Bracy.
I mean,
Tariq Bracy, because they're going to use their bigger receivers, because that's what worked for them in 2019 is Tariq was in great position against their receivers back then. But they just outplayed him for the ball. I mean, they were too big. I mean, I remember watching that and being like, goodness gracious, like they had Hassis Dubois and Joe Reed, just bigger guys, and they were out muscling them for the ball.
Right.
They're going to do that again. They have guys to do that again. They're going to do it, and Notre Dame's guys are going to have to make some plays. That's going to be the key.
Absolutely. Yep. No question about it. What's your next matchup?
Well, it's offensively. It's the offensive line against Mandy Alonso. I mean, I've already kind of gone into all 4 of my matchups for the defense.
Okay.
I mean, they all kind of go into one. For me,
that's fair.
Yeah. For me, it's about moving over to the offense and looking at that matchup.
Well, I'll give my last one defensively then. I actually had the safeties versus Jilani Woods, just because I think he is a matchup problem for Notre Dame, especially if Kyle Hamilton's not going to play.
Right.
And you mentioned him against the linebackers. Of course, the linebackers are going to be involved in defending, a tight end. I put safeties just because the absence of Kyle Hamilton is so huge.
Well, it's not going to just be the linebackers.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is because of the presence of Kaitlyn Thompson, who's basically like a second tight end and how they use him. He's like a big receiver / hybrid tight end. He's like kind of like they use him how Notre Dame should have used Tommy Tremble, right? That then puts you in an even bigger stress when it comes to dealing with Jilani Woods, because you got 2 big 6'4" guys that can play the hashes and make you chase. And it's a challenge.
Yes, no
question.
It's a
challenge for sure.
So let's go to the offensive side of the ball for Notre Dame. And like you said, you could just kind of pick many different matchups here, and they're going to favor Notre Dame. You said offensive line versus
Mandy Alonso is my one concerning, troubling matchup, because he's a big, strong kid. He's a good football player, and when he's playing, when they're using him to really attack a line, he can do damage. And he's a guy that can blow linemen up. He's a good kid. Because he's real short, and he's real stout, and he can get up underneath your pads. And what's the one thing Notre Dame's offensive linemen have struggled with all season? People getting up underneath their pads and driving them back, especially the right side of the line. And so that's a big concern for me. Notre Dame's going to try to establish a run game, and Mandy Alonso getting up underneath the pads, because you say, well, he didn't have success against BYU. That's because BYU's linemen are well coached and play hard.
Right.
I don't mean play hard. That's not the phrase that I meant. I didn't make play hard, because I'm not questioning the desire of the Notre Dame offensive linemen. They're taught to play physical football.
Sure.
Is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So this group is not taught to play that way. They're taught to catch. Well, this is the kind of kid that if you try to catch, he's going to get up in your chest and knock you off the ball. So they're going to have a game plan for him, whether it's running away from him, because he's not really athletic enough, in my opinion, to chase a bunch from the back. He's more of a 3-4 big, 280 plus stuffing end type of end. He'd be more of a 3 technique at Notre Dame. He'd be doing more of Jason Adam. He probably would be playing nose in the Notre Dame defense.
Sure.
Just the way that it's so he's that kind of tough kid. So to me, that's the one matchup where he could blow everything up in the run game, and all of a sudden you're having a hard time. And really just the whole D-line, because they're big. We talked about this on Tuesday. Vince. They are a big group.
They are.
And Notre Dame's offensive line has not really played well against big guys. So this is a chance for a little bit of redemption to show something. If you can come out and be physical against this group and get movement and open up run lanes and those kind of things, then I'll feel a lot better about that this line truly has turned a corner, because the last 3 defensive lines you've faced are undersized and not very good. This defensive line's not real good based on how they're used, but they are big and physical.
They're big. Yeah, they're big.
And that's the thing that I want to see. And so that's one matchup that I'm looking forward to.
Well,
how this team is.
I will echo yours and go to mine that had to do with the offensive line. And I wrote down Lug and Alt versus the edge / Alonso. So you and I were right on the same page on that one. I'm not as worried about the middle, because they do run they run an odd front most of the time. And when that happens, you get a lot of double teams on that nose. And I feel like that plays into the hands of where Notre Dame is actually good in the run game. Now, if they start doing all kinds of crazy stuff, but I don't see them doing that with that big line up front.
Yeah.
They're more muscle at you, power stuff. And I feel like that actually plays into the hand of Kane Madden and how they want to play,
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm more concerned about whether or not they're able to get off those double teams to the crashing linebackers than I am about the nose.
Right.
It's more the two big, you call them edge, but the 2 ends.
They're named defensive ends.
Yeah.
But they're 5 techniques for the most part. But That's what I had as well. So we are on the same page on that one. So would you like to go again, or you want to snake it?
Yeah, I mean, we do whatever you want, but I'll go. So since you already offered it to me, I will take full advantage of that.
Fair enough.
I think, we talked a lot about Virginia's matchup with their tight ends, and again, I don't even know what I tell you what, Virginia has the best name for a position ever.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look at how they list Kaitlyn Thompson on the depth chart. Now, just a little background. Kaitlyn Thompson actually was a quarterback recruit. Notre Dame actually looked at him for a little bit. He was more of a running quarterback. He didn't really fit their style. Well, went to Mississippi State, and he's clearly not a quarterback at this point in time. So, for me, I look at the kid and say, oh, he's just an athlete. Well, his position is FBP, and I didn't know what the heck that meant. And what it means is football player. I love it. And I'm like, it's because it's so appropriate. They'll use him as like lined up in the backfield. They'll put him in like a wing position as a lead blocker. They'll put him in the slot. They'll put him in like sort of a tight end position. They'll line him up as the X or the W. I mean, he literally lines up all over. And he's 6'4", 210. Jilani Woods is 6'7", 265. They're going to use those guys. Well, you know what? Neither of them are still the best player, the best tight end on the field. The best talent on the field is still the kid that plays for Notre Dame.
No question.
And Notre Dame staff has not done a good job of – they're basically allowing teams to take Michael Mayer out of the game with, hey, well, you know what, they're just they're doing this to Michael, and they're not going to let him play, and he he's just not going to do this, that, and the other. And I'm looking at Michael Mayer the last 3 games, 5 catches for 54 yards, 4 for 51, 4 for 28. He hasn't caught a touchdown pass since the freaking Toledo game. Hey, Notre Dame, you want to know why your red zone offense sucks? Because you don't make Michael Mayer part of it.
Exactly.
Right? He hasn't caught a touchdown pass since September 11th, right? We're 2 months since Michael Mayer's caught a touchdown pass. This isn't a Michael Mayer problem, okay? And so I want to see the Notre Dame staff use the same creativity that the Virginia staff does to make sure that Michael Mayer is making plays, because if they use him correctly, Michael Mayer can go off in this game, because their safeties and their outside linebackers and inside. There's not a dude that they're going to put on the field on Saturday that can play with Michael Mayer.
Right.
And if Notre Dame, again, you can't just line him up the same ways you always have, because they will have a game plan for him. You have to get creative with how you use Michael Mayer. And if they can do that and be willing to attack the seams and get him on backside seams, front side seams, get him on deep crossing routes, drags, things like that, then those are things that I believe that you can do to really get him going. And if you can get Michael Mayer going early, maybe it's a situation like a lot of his production comes in the first half, and then they've got to go in and kind of start it all over at halftime. Hey, we got to do this, this, and this, and then they can take him out in the second half. But the reason I say it's important to move him all around is because then they have to spend more time figuring out how to defend him, which then leaves you with some other opportunities outside. It gives you some matchup opportunities with your other receivers. And so to me, that's why it's so important to be creative with how you use him. Mm-hmm. And if you use that and you take advantage of the fact that you have a significant matchup advantage with him against anybody they're going to match him up against. So don't let them game plan him out of the game. Then you're going to have success. And then that opens up opportunities for Lorenzo Styles and Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey and Kyron Williams and Chris Tyree of the backfield. So to me, that's the biggest matchup for Notre Dame, is how you use him is going to determine how you're able to take advantage of some of those other matchups, in my opinion.
It's funny that you should mention some of those other matchups, because I had Lorenzo Styles versus question mark. So basically, which of the 6 guys that they continually drop into coverage is going to cover Lorenzo Styles, but more so that I'm not worried about who they put on Lorenzo Styles. And I'm not even worried about it. I'm interested to see how he does with the increased workload, right? With Avery Davis going out, it's basically, what was it? Avery Davis had 44 snaps and Lorenzo Styles had like 14, and that's going to get flipped on its head, obviously, because Davis is out. So how does Lorenzo Styles do, in his first extended playing time for Notre Dame? And what does it look like with him in the slot? I think they can do all kinds of fun stuff with him. And I feel like this is the perfect game for him to get that opportunity because of the way this defense plays. I think he's going to be open, and he's going to get opportunity to with the ball in space. And I'm excited to see 21 with the ball in space against this defense. I think this could be a little bit of a coming out party for him. And I realize he's had some electric plays and he's done some great things. I think this could really be something fun to watch with Lorenzo's style. So he's going to be somebody I'll be keeping my eye on.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. And how Notre Dame uses him. See, so much of this, the reason I don't really have any other matchups, Vince, is because, as I said before, there's really nobody that concerns me. Even USC's bad defense, there's they had a couple good corners, and North Carolina had some good corners, even though Kyler McMichael ended up not playing that game. Tony Grimes' talent. This team just does not have any talent on defense in the back 8.
Gotcha.
Noah Taylor 2 years ago I liked a lot. Joey Blunt 2 years ago I liked a lot. Neither of those guys are worth a darn right now, because I think part of it's because how they're being used. But to me, it's just about, look, you've got playmakers, and we'll get into this in your keys to the game, and that's why I'm going to focus more on the offense when it comes to the keys to the game than matchups, because there's nowhere where Virginia has a matchup over you outside of Mandy Alonso. Right,
well,
that's it.
Yeah, the only other key that I had, or the matchup that I had, and it sounds a little ridiculous, but I'm dead serious. It's the offense versus themselves. This is a game. This is a game where you should be effective in whatever it is that you want to do, but you have to do it at a high level. And I know that sounds silly, but there's nobody when Notre Dame's offense is on the field. The only group of people that can stop Notre Dame's offense is Notre Dame's offense, and so they're kind of competing against themselves, in my opinion.
Well, and I have that more as a key to the game than a matchup.
That's fair. Yeah,
for me. Yeah.
Yep. Cool.